I want to kick things off by talking about what does a great employee experience look like at each of your organizations?
Yeah, actually, one of the challenges we had was we had very inconsistent kind of values, branding. We've got 50 sites, most of them plants. And whenever you went from one place to another, there was a very inconsistent look and feel. So we've done a lot of work on that over the last year so that whenever you go into a plant or an office, there's a consistent look and feel. It feels like the same, part of the same organization. Our kind of core values are everywhere. And we've got a big challenge here because 15,000 of our 20,000 employees don't have a company device. So we've tried to do some ingenious things around working to reach out to those employees that that we don't use for those that have got company devices. So we've been very conscious of that. But I think it's really nice to see what's gone on in the last year because we've put a huge investment in that kind of employee experience and feeling all part of the GKN organisation. Actually, just one thing we have had a challenge with though is we, even on the kind of transaction, the standard stuff like around onboarding experience was pretty poor. So we've done as we deployed recruitment and onboarding the Oracle module just over 8 months ago. We've kind of put a lot of time and effort into that because our onboarding experience was very, very much related to where you were based and the local site. And we didn't want to lose that because there were some really good materials out there, but also we found particularly sort of our global materials, corporate materials weren't getting to employees and particularly weren't getting to them in a timely manner until after they joined. So we've kind of deployed AD, Active Directory access to everybody, linking that in with onboarding and also getting email. Everybody's got a smart device, everybody's got an email address now. So we're kind of using those to reach out for pre-boarding, making sure there's a consistent, look and feel to the content. And I think we'll see long-term, dividends pay back in that because, I know previous companies, a lot of our surveys when we look at why people leave, it's eight times out of 10 somebody mentions the onboarding experience being poor. So I think if we get that right, we'll definitely impact the attrition rates going forward, which we've really invested in that. So it's nice to see.
Someone asked, where do you start? Which is kind of what you just kind of. So I'd love to jump on and throw that question in. Where would you recommend our audience to start on their journey? How do they go about identifying where to focus their time and attention?
I think you need to introduce. And at my last company, we had some good stuff around what most at risk, and that had a lot of kind of AI and assumptions built in. So it wasn't looking at one or two things; it was looking at about 40 or 50 if you had the information to feed in. And I think you'd need to do it on that basis. So you'd have to look at all the variables, feed that in, and in order to get something that's useful. But actually, it did work because if I looked at it in my last company. The reports that were coming out when we first ran it, if I looked at the people who I would have said were most at risk in my team, because it looked at things like distance to work, performance ratings, it literally had 40 to 50 variables. If you had the information on each employee, it really was pretty accurate. So I think that's the route to go on this. But I think that is where, definitely, Chris, I think, that's where a lot of companies are going to want to end up in the next few years, because that's where you're going to get real value out of the info that we've got.
Darren had a question. I asked, how do you guys feel about the quality of the organization's leadership as the most important baseline? Is this the single most important, impact for experience interactions with the business is what they're hearing from the leadership team?
I think it's really important because sometimes you have to do things in a company that might seem that they're not congruent with your values. And so I think you need to kind of go through, look at those moments and make sure that you explain them, because we're not just accountable to our shareholders, we're accountable to our employees, and I think that's got to apply at leadership level more than anywhere. And actually, I think we've done a pretty good job of that, GKN, because there are you do have to make tough decisions. We've had a lot of challenges, but probably more so in the last 2 or 3 years than any other period. Just with with COVID, semiconductor crisis, and but I think it's really important that you explain the decisions that you're making and share those all the way across the organisation. And I think we've done a pretty good job here at that. But absolutely, it's got to be it's so important that it's the leadership who are following those. Interesting quandary, just slightly separate, but around the home, office working and non-office, because we have most of our employees in plants and they have to go in. So really, it's very difficult for us to say in the office environment, or GBSN as well. It's you can all work remotely, although people can do the jobs, because I think as an organisation, it's important that maybe not everyone's in 5 days a week, but we're in kind of most of the time, because you can't have one group of employees who are in every single day, and then others have got complete freedom. So I think there's a balance to be had there, particularly in an organisation like ours.
Before I kind of we wrap things up, I just want to ask a question of, we've covered so much today. What sort of parting piece of advice would you give to the audience? One thing that they should go away and focus on. And Fraser, you're on this journey as we speak. So what advice would you give to people that are on this journey early in the journey?
I think pick your focus areas, because we've had to invest in all areas. But I think the onboarding, experience, and offboarding, actually linking into what Martin just said, because people aren't here forever, but if they have a really good onboarding and a good offboarding experience, you're likely to be able to get them back when you have their next opportunity for them.